Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Tuesday morning by Andrew Erickson and by our guest, it's Theo Gremminger of Player Profiler. Theo, thank you so much. I believe this is certainly the first time I've been on the show with you, so it's great to meet you, but first time on Fantasy Pros as well?
Yeah, first time on Fantasy Pros. I've had a bunch of you guys come on our podcast at Player Profiler, so stoked to come into your house because you guys have been in my house so many times.
Well, we are really appreciative of you making the time to join us here. We are headed into week 11. As always, we have a jam-packed show, so we will dive right in. We are talking buy low, sell high, running backs here to start. And guys, when I was looking through our data in Fantasy Pros My Playbook to determine who the most traded running backs were that we were going to talk about at the top of the show, one name stood above the rest. In fact, Tony Pollard has been traded more in the last day, more than twice as often as any other running back in football. So people are either buying low or they're selling high right now. Not a whole lot of holding. Erickson, I'll start with you. Are you buying, selling, or holding on Tony Pollard currently?
I'm going to buy Tony Pollard. I know that a lot of trade deadlines are coming up, and this is probably your last chance, and I get it. He can't find the end zone. The greatest battle is between Tony Pollard and the end zone. The greatest historic battle that's been happening here in 2023. But the way I look at it is, look, they're playing the Panthers this week. Last year, the Panthers gave up the biggest regression games to Joe Mixon and Mike Evans. Those guys could not score touchdowns all season long until they played the Panthers, and they scored not one, not two, like 3 touchdown games, just like monster games. And if Tony Pollard's ever going to score a touchdown, like it has to be this week. Like I get last week he was slated up to do it, but the Cowboys, it must be a bit at this point because they're getting literally anyone else to score a rush, not even like receiving touchdowns, rushing touchdowns besides Tony Pollard. Like Lamb had a rushing touchdown, Dak had a rushing touchdown, Dowdle had a rushing touchdown. It's like, it's a bit at this point, right? It has to be. So again, I think that they're still committed to him as a starter. You know, from what I was watching from that game, it didn't really seem like Dowdle's really like, I don't think his role has really changed that much. He's still the backup. Obviously got more playing time because they were blowing out the Giants, but still Pollard outcarried him 11-4 in the first half. Pollard's still getting the first opportunities in the red zone, just hasn't converted them. So look, I'm just going to follow the math here and say like, look, he can only have so many touches without scoring a touchdown against the Panthers, who are the league's worst run defense, especially when it comes to giving up rushing touchdowns. Like, this is the spot. This is the spot for Tony Pollard. So if I'm hurting, I don't have a lot of upside in my roster. Tony Pollard is dirt cheap. People do not want him. People don't want to start him anymore. People want to start Rico Dowdle instead of Tony Pollard. I'm like, guys, like that's not the case. Like, he's still the starter. So for me, I'm going to buy.
Theo, are you buying, selling, or holding? And also, do you kind of buy into the narrative I've seen lately of like maybe Zeke actually was helping out Pollard a bit?
I think there's something to be said with that where, you have a kind of a back kind of protecting the secondary back. It's kind of like the Jalen Warren, Najee Harris argument where Jalen Warren looks a lot more explosive. Jalen Warren rips off the big plays, but, he's not taking those hits that Najee Harris is absorbing. But I don't know, with Tony Pollard, I am a little bit more worried than Andrew is. And I think for me, if I have him, I'm going to just begrudgingly hold unless I get a kind of a decent offer. But if I get a decent offer that I can pivot off of him, I think I'm doing that. It seems like post bye week, it's been kind of a pivot over to this is CeeDee Lamb's offense. And I think that's kind of the best thing that they can do. And you're starting to see the other pass catchers also producing. But for me, it's Pollard just doesn't look nearly as explosive as he has in years past. I think that the injury mattered more than maybe we gave weight to in the offseason. I do agree with Andrew that he's the starter. Dowdle is not going to take his job. But right now he has the lowest yards per carry of his entire career with 3.9, the lowest yards per reception at 6.6, and his longest run from scrimmage is 31 yards. Every other year in his career, he's ripped off longer runs than that. If he's not getting touchdowns and we're depending on him being a touchdown dependent kind of RB2, then for me, he's either a hold or a sell rather than a buy.
I want to run through some actual trades that have happened. These have all been done in the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app. These are real life trades. I want to get your guys' opinion on them. Some big names being moved for Tony Pollard. So Theo, would you trade Tony Pollard for Travis Kelce if you needed a tight end?
100%.
How about Tony Pollard for Cooper Kupp?
Yes, I think that's the kind of pivot that I would look to make as well.
One more here, Tony Pollard and Jalen Waddle for Jonathan Taylor and Nico Collins. Again, that's Pollard and Waddle for Jonathan Taylor and Nico Collins.
I'm going to probably stick with the Pollard and Waddle side for that one.
Erickson, what do you think about those trades? Again, it was Pollard for Kelsey, Pollard for Kupp, Pollard and Waddle for Taylor and Collins. Any of those stand out to you?
Actually, it's funny, as I talk about wanting to buy Pollard, the one I actually like the most is actually getting Jonathan Taylor, because I like JT the rest of the season. Like, I think that he can be top 5 running back. I mean, he's totally deleted Zach Moss from that backfield in terms of the targets and the touches. So, I removed JT ahead of Pollard in my rest of season rankings. He's my RB5 rest of season, even though he's on a bye week this week. So I would want to get Jonathan Taylor. I see that as a massive upgrade, moving on from Pollard. And Waddle's obviously been kind of hit or miss this year, but you could say the same about Nico Collins, like pretty hit or miss. And I don't love the schedule necessarily for the Dolphins rest of season. So I will take JT, who I think is just the best player in that deal.
Pollard has dropped to RB13 in our expert consensus rest of season rankings. Jonathan Taylor's RB4. He's actually moved up even higher than Erickson has him. So the consensus would agree with you on that being an upgrade there, Erickson. Can you guys believe we're already this deep into the NFL season? We've got to make every second count, and with DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game day. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on any matchup. This week, we've got a couple of head-to-head matchups in the best division in football, with the Ravens and Bengals squaring off on Thursday Night Football, while the Browns and the Steelers go head-to-head on Sunday. Both of those lines are at 3.5 on DraftKings right now. Plus, we've got an amazing Monday Night Football matchup with Eagles-Chiefs. Kansas City is laying a field goal at home in that one. I cannot wait to watch all of these games and definitely to bet them as well. However you guys plan to bet those games, get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use code FantasyPros. New customers can score just 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on the NFL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code FantasyPros. The crown is yours. Fellas, let's move to our next most traded running back, and it's Keaton Mitchell. Obviously, an explosive, few runs here, not getting a ton of touches, been extremely efficient with the touches he has gotten across the last 2 games. So I'm really curious to see where both of you guys come down on him. Theo, we'll start with you this time. Are you buying, selling, or holding on Keaton Mitchell right now?
For me, I'm going to take an optimistic approach, and I'm either buying or holding. I think if I'm going to sell Keaton Mitchell, it's got to be for and I'm interested to hear, some of the trades that went down, Ryan, because to me, I think it's a self-scouting, and I think Baltimore's got to look at Keaton Mitchell as a guy who right now could be their most explosive player on offense. The 200 yards on 14 touches is unsustainable, but it's there, and he's a threat to house it every single time he gets the ball. And these are his only first 2 games as a pro, and he's been able to do this. So I'm going to take an optimistic approach on Mitchell. I know a lot of people are very scared of the volume, and they're looking at this as their opportunity to cash out. But for me, it's definitely a hold, or if somebody's looking to sell and I don't have to overpay, I'm happy to take him on my roster. And the Justice Hill snaps, sorry to interrupt you, the Justice Hill snaps, I'm interested to hear Andrew's opinion on this, because 14-13 on the snaps with Justice Hill, I think he can absorb all of those snaps, and I think Justice Hill can really be relegated. Gus Edwards is not going away. He's a thing. He's got a clear role in the offense, but Mitchell's different than what they have, and I think coming off of a loss, divisional game against Cincinnati, I think you could see his usage amp up.
Yeah, we have some more listener questions from Twitter coming later, but I wanted to mention one of them now because it was about Keaton Mitchell. The question was, Keaton Mitchell, real potential and worth a lot of fab potentially if he's still available. Results are a bit misleading with one big play and few opportunities. I don't think that's entirely right. I think from a macro level, he's right. It hasn't been just one big play, though. It's been like 4 or 5 on these still very few limited opportunities. But it's not just that he broke one long run. It's been a long catch. They've gone after him in, with a wheel route they attempted, in this last game. They're trying to get him more usage. At least they did in the early part of the game. They didn't really give him enough touches in the second half, but it's been more than one big play is my ultimate point. So Erickson, I'm curious, you are a guy who really puts a lot of value in the usage that guys are getting and the volume. So where do you come down on Mitchell, buying, selling, or holding?
Yeah, I think for me, it's going to be either a buy or hold for Mitchell. I understand the argument of trying to sell high. Also, but I think that you can't really sell high on waiver wire guys. Like, I really don't think that's something that actually works. Unless it's a very long sample size. Like even like Puka Nacua, for example, like everyone picked him up, but it like took a while for people to kind of like, okay, now he's like actually like a firm asset where, you know, if Keaton Mitchell has like a dud game, like you could see him get dropped. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's worth selling because I don't think you're going to get a lot for him. So for me, it's a hold buy opportunity because yes, the touches have not been there, but I think we have to give credit to how good he has looked. And what do coaches do, right? And this goes back to, you know, I was pounding the table for Jalen Reagor unders, right? In the receiving game for the Patriots because he got opportunities, but he was horrible with them. So what did the team do? They had him play one snap on offense because he didn't do good or didn't do well with his touches. Keaton Mitchell, he's doing well with his touches. And it's not in the box score, but he also dropped another touchdown. Worm, I'm sure you can attest to that. Like, he dropped a touchdown on another big play that he could have had. So, yes, he had a big play, but he could have had another big play. I agree he's the most explosive player on that offense that, again, OBJ is not going to rip off a slant for a touchdown every single week. Like, he is their most explosive player. So, especially with their bye week still coming up, they can get him more involved in this offense. So, I think his role is actually going to grow. I think he can totally dethrone Justice Hill. And when you look at the Ravens, their schedule has been really favorable. They've been able to feed Gus Edwards leading in games as their banger back. When they're down 10-0 against the Bengals on Thursday night, again, maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, but in tougher matchups, they need a guy like Keaton Mitchell to get back in the game on offense. So that's the way I see it, the situation. I'd also be a Gus Edwards seller, of course, like I am every single week, but for that reason, I would also buy Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah, it's one of those things where obviously, like, as a Ravens fan, I watch every snap of this team. I can't remember the last time I saw a running back that had this kind of juice. It just, eye test alone, it looks different when he breaks away. And he's also creating these open field opportunities. They're not just like, oh, this hole opened up and he happens to have the speed to take advantage. He's breaking tackles and then pulling away, like, seemingly with ease. To me, the bigger concern is just health. Like, he started the season on IR. He is a little guy. Like, I do just worry about that in the back of my mind. But, like, in terms of the efficiency, like, I almost don't care if he doesn't get that many more touches. I think he will. I think you guys are both right. I think he will absorb most of Justice Hill's touches as long as he's good in pass protection. But, like, it just looks different when he's got the ball in his hands. I want to throw out some of these trades. Theo, we'll start with you here. Keaton Mitchell for Deontay Foreman.
100% Keaton Mitchell.
How about Keaton Mitchell and James Conner for Puka Nacua?
I might go with unless I was really, really starving for running back production, I think I'm going Puka Nacua on that one.
And the other one here, some bigger names, Keaton Mitchell and Rhamondre Stevenson for Devonta Smith.
I might take that's a very tough one. I want to take the running backs, but with the Dallas Goedert potentially missing a month, Devonta Smith being red hot. Gosh, that's a really, really hard one. I want, it's like the heart is saying go with Keaton Mitchell and Rhamondre Stevenson, but the head is saying go with Devonta Smith.
Yeah. Erickson, what do you think about any of those? I'll run through them again for you. Is Keaton Mitchell for Deontay Foreman, Keaton Mitchell and James Conner for Puka Nacua, and then Keaton Mitchell and Rhamondre Stevenson for Devonta Smith. Are you making any of those, Erickson?
I love the Deontay Foreman one. I actually just checked my rest of season rankings. I had them back to back. I actually just moved Keaton Mitchell one spot ahead of Deontay Foreman because I think that's like a really sharp move to make. This Bears backfield, number one, has a horrible schedule coming up. Number two, it's going to be like a four-headed monster with all the guys when Khalil Herbert comes back. And Foreman has been productive. Like, you can definitely move Foreman after he's been really productive for the Bears. Even if he's like the 1A in this backfield, it's a piece of a backfield that I do not want any part of. And the fact that they were both waiver wire guys, this is a deal I think you can make. And I think that the Deontay Foreman manager will probably click it without even thinking twice about it. Like, oh, he's getting all the volume. Like, come on. Like, this is easy. So I think Mitchell, this is a really sharp play as a long play, whereas Foreman has obviously been the bigger producer the last couple weeks.
Those are all real trades that have gone down, but before you guys make any trades yourself, you need to check out our trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Instantly see who wins any trade and how it shifts the balance of power in your league for the week, the rest of the season, even beyond for dynasty leaguers. Stay ahead and play smart with the trade analyzer on fantasypros.com/myplaybook and on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Guys, let's get into the buy low running backs. Theo, starting with you, who's your top buy low running back?
So this guy has not been a guy who is like incredibly low in terms of, you know, his ranks in terms of running backs, but it's a guy whose production lately has been kind of uninspiring, and that's DeAndre Swift. So kind of a recency bias. The guy has had 2 recent games where he's failed to get 11 PPR points. So I think the DeAndre Swift manager might be getting a little nervous that, you know, maybe a little bit of regression from his early season success. But there's been some very, very positive, takes with the amount of snaps he's been playing. He's had 65+% of snaps in week 7, 8, and 9. And I brought up the Dallas Goedert injury for the Devonta Smith trade. I think that this could be a big help to Swift and also potentially just a little bit more Gainwell. I think they're going to have to utilize their running backs more in Philadelphia now. And I think that what's exciting is we've already seen him have a 6-target game and an 8-target game in week 5 and 6. I think that could be kind of the norm. I'm really curious because I think this is an organization that gets it. We talk about self-scouting during bye weeks. I think the offense is going to look slightly different. I think there's going to be more DeAndre Swift utilization. And they have some difficult games coming up. You know, they have the Bills, they have the 49ers. There's going to be opportunities for him to be used as a pass catcher. I think we're going to see multiple games for Swift with high volume, high percent of snaps, and potential for higher target share.
Yeah, the next 4 games at Kansas City, home against Buffalo, home against San Francisco, at Dallas, then at Seattle after that. But weeks 16 and 17, when it's winning time in the fantasy playoffs, he gets home against the Giants and home against the Cardinals. So it also lightens up really nicely there for a strong finish. Swift is currently RB8 in our expert consensus rest of season rankings. Do you think that's too high, too low, or about right, Theo?
I think it's about right. And I think that your expert consensus is more accurate for where he should be, but I don't think the trade market is going to value him as RB8. I think you can get him for slightly cheaper as well. I think that there's always kind of a little bit of doubt when it comes to Philadelphia running backs, even with the success they have. And I think there's always a little bit of fantasy fear with DeAndre Swift that he's going to get hurt and miss some time.
Erickson, before you jump into your top buy low running back, where do you have Swift rest of the season? Do you think 8's about right too?
Yeah, so I have him actually at RB7, and I feel pretty good about where I have him, like the running backs ahead of him. It's McCaffrey, Etienne, Eckler, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, and Bijan, and then I have Swift. So Pollard, I would move Pollard to get Swift. I would move Josh Jacobs to get Swift. Like, I would rather have my wagons attached to this Eagles offense than with Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders. Like, I know Jacobs has gotten a lot of, I think that's a trade you can probably get done too. Like, you can probably move Jacobs to get Swift, or maybe even Saquon Barkley. So that's kind of where I view Swift.
All right. And who's your top buy low running back, Erickson?
Yeah, so I mentioned him when I was talking about my rest of season rankings inside the top 5. Like, I have Breece Hall RB4 because I absolutely love his schedule rest of season. And he's getting all the work in the New York Jets backfield. Like, they're playing the Buffalo Bills this week. The Bills, again, as disappointing as the Patriots are, I don't think any team has been more disappointing versus expectation than the Buffalo Bills this season. Like, they can't get out of their own way, and they're just giving away games to teams. So they're down bad right now. I think the Jets can take advantage, especially on the ground game. I know Breece Hall was disappointing against the Raiders, and I know that the Jets haven't been able to score touchdowns this extremely long streak, even though Zach Wilson scored a touchdown and they got called back and then they didn't score at all. I think that's going to regress positively in favor of Breece Hall. Again, he's getting healthier. This was always the play with Breece Hall, even back to draft seasons, second half. The Jets' schedule eases up in the second half of the year. This is when you want Breece Hall. Maybe Aaron Rodgers comes back. I would not make this trade solely based on that. But if he does, great. We'll take it. But I think Breece Hall has shown us enough with the uptick in snaps that he's getting, uses in the passing game, and just the schedule overall, especially with the Bills this week, I think Breece Hall is a guy that I definitely want to buy. And you can get him because the Jets offense, nobody wants them, but it's so concentrated around Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson that that's enough, in my opinion, if the touchdowns come, for Breece Hall to be a potential league winner down the stretch.
Yeah, Theo, I want to get your opinion on Hall as well. I mean, he's RB5 in ECR, but sort of similar to like we're talking about with Swift. I don't know that that's where the trade market would necessarily value him. I mean, he's coming off back-to-back games in half PPR with, RB27 finish, RB30 finish, not cracking double digits in either of those games. So where do you have Hall in your rest of season rankings, and do you think 5 is about right for him?
I'm with Andrew. I think 5's about right. I think that the yards per carry have been really, really disappointing, but he's insulated by the fact that he's such a good receiver out of the backfield. And it's a very, the offense is not good, but at least it's very consolidated. So we can have a great expectation that it's going to be a lot of Breece Hall and a lot of Garrett Wilson. And I do think that he's too talented a player that he's not going to rip off a couple of big runs, and you're going to see that yards per carry move up a little bit. I'm with Andrew. I want to have very, very talented players that I think are going to end the season well. So if somebody in your league is getting a little bit nervous, I think it's a good time to kick the tires on Breece Hall. And I do think there's a little bit of I don't want anything to do with the New York Jets offense. I don't mind getting rid of these guys because I don't want to have to be part of like a potential Zach Wilson train wreck. But I'll take the optimistic side. Give me some Breece Hall. Give me some Garrett Wilson. I think those two guys are going to end the season very, very well. They're very, very talented players, and we love consolidation.
Theo, I want to stick with you here as we move to our sell high running backs. Who's your top choice here?
Well, I think you have a really good window right now to sell Ken Walker. And this past week, Ken Walker gets the long touchdown reception. He ends up with 19 carries, but we've now had 3 straight weeks of him being outsnapped by Zach Charbonnet. You also have Zach Charbonnet being more efficient on first down conversions. I mean, he's 8-3 on first down conversions. There's like some fear in the back of my mind that you're going to continue to see Zach Charbonnet kind of amping up his usage. You're already seeing him getting the snaps. You're already seeing him getting more targets than Ken Walker. I'm fearful for this, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for Ken Walker managers to sell high based on the fact that he had the big explosive play that's going to be, in everyone's mind. I mean, Ken Walker is a very good player, very, very talented running back. He's got the ability to make big plays and win fantasy weeks, but you cannot depend on a guy with unsustainable volume when there's a younger back that's a threat to him right behind him. If I knew that the guy was going to get 65% of snaps, I'd be all about it. But when I have to worry about him getting sub 50%, I worry a lot. So I'm taking the opportunity to sell high this week. And I think you're going to see more Charbonnet than you want to see if you're a Ken Walker manager.
Erickson, this was the only player that you guys both picked before, I sent you each other's names. So
I feel smart now. I feel smart. Andrew picked my guy. That's great. Good stuff,
he talked
Andrew.
a big game about there wasn't going to be any overlaps, and then there was, but this was the only one. So Erickson, I'll allow you to add to Kenneth Walker here if you'd like to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Worm, because it's the right answer. I really think that he is the number one sell high running back, and hitting on the points or just kind of echoing what Theo had said about the snap share with Zach Charbonnet. Part of that is because the Seahawks have been in more competitive games, and they've been facing more back and forth contests, negative game script. Look, the schedule they're playing is Rams, 49ers, Cowboys, 49ers. In what game is Seattle going to be favored in? None. Like, they're, I think, 1-point favorites right now against the Rams. They're on the road, but that's a game that they could be trailing in. Where's Kenneth Walker? Is he on the field? No. Like, Zach Charbonnet is going to be on the field when it's obvious passing downs. 49ers, Cowboys, 49ers. Like, the schedule, when you look at the FantasyPros strength of schedule tool, which I suggest everybody go check out on the website when you're kind of looking and trying to make trades, it's the worst schedule for running backs is Seattle. So not only is he losing out to work to Charbonnet, but like the matchups are not there for him to necessarily be successful and find room as a runner. Now, it's not necessarily because the defense he's playing are bad, but it's because, again, they're trailing in these games, which Vegas is going to kind of suggest that based on the lines, that's going to be a problem for Ken Walker. So, yeah, that's why I agreed with him as a must-sell running back. And especially, it's kind of like the perfect storm, honestly, because not only was it a big play, it was a reception on his one of 2 targets. Like, that's something he never does, is like catch a pass and run for 60 yards for a touchdown. Like, it's really the perfect storm to honestly sell high on Ken Walker with the schedule getting really, really tough coming up.
Yeah. Erickson, all right, so who was your backup choice that I made you pick so we can hit another name here?
Ken Walker light, essentially. Another guy who's splitting snaps with a running back. Brian Robinson for the Commanders. Look, the Commanders want to throw the ball. They want to throw the ball. They want to throw the ball. Like, they don't care about running the football, and that's really where Brian Robinson's strengths are. And again, I'm just selling high off a running back that doesn't traditionally get a lot of work in the receiving game. For that's why I'm selling Brian Robinson. Again, he ripped off a massive touchdown reception, but he's not even the lead running back in terms of pass catching in his own backfield. Antonio Gibson, his usage has been ramped up the last 3 weeks. He has 5+ catches, 5+ targets in 3 straight games, as Eric Bieniemy's kind of dialing up more running back pass attempts to kind of protect Sam Howell, getting the ball out quicker, so he's not taking like so many sacks. But they're still throwing the ball at a higher rate than almost any other team in the NFL. That's not good for Brian Robinson because he's the early down grinder back. And again, going back to projected game script, again, this week's a good against the Giants, but Brian Robinson got shut down against the Giants a couple weeks ago. Like, this whole Commanders offense got shut down. So on paper, the matchup looks so good that you can sell high on Brian Robinson because after the Giants, the schedule is bottom 5 overall for running backs for the rest of the season. You do not want part of this Commanders offense as the season progresses, especially in the fantasy playoffs. So the matchup looks good on paper against the Giants. I would use that along with Brian Robinson's big touchdown reception, even though he's still splitting snaps with Antonio Gibson, as a way to sell off of him and hopefully get something back in return that's decent.
If you guys need new tires for your car, Discount Tire is your go-to. They have exceptional service, and you get a 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online at discounttire.com. They have this really cool feature called Treadwell, which is an online tire buying guide that gives you transparency on tire performance, as well as personalized recommendations based on your location and driving habits. Discount Tire is also the largest independent tire retailer in the country, so it has the biggest selection of tires and wheels. And here's a pro tip from the experts at Discount Tire. You can prevent wear and boost gas mileage by keeping your tires properly inflated. Tire pressure supports the weight of your vehicle and is important to check for safety. So if it's been over a month since you last checked your tire pressure, stop by one of their local stores for a free tire safety and air pressure check. Discount Tire. Let's get you taken care of. Guys, let's wrap up with another listener question from Twitter here. This one's pretty easy, but it was asked, Zach Moss, drop or hold? Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is taking back over that backfield in full swing. Is Zach Moss a good enough handcuff that we're holding on to him no matter what? Or are we willing to drop him if we need the roster spot? What say you, Theo?
I mean, I'm trying to hold him if I can because we see how valuable these handcuff running backs can be. And it's a handcuff running back that we look at as a like-for-like replacement. So I think he would absorb, unlike some of these handcuffs, he would absorb all of the volume if Jonathan Taylor were to miss time. But that being said, this time of year, it's about grinding out wins, and I'm not going to hold a dead roster spot if it means grabbing a guy that can help me this week. That's the most important thing, is get wins. So it's really roster dependent. In a perfect world, definitely hold on to Zach Moss, but you know your roster better than we do.
Erickson, what do you think about Moss?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to drop someone, especially this week, because you'd assume that Jonathan Taylor can't get hurt on a bye week. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I think that even if you have Zach Moss, I think this is probably the week that you can drop him safely, and you can then even scoop him back up if you are a JT owner. So just kind of keep that in mind. Unless JT gets hurt on the bye week, please,
don't even
JT,
say it. Don't say it, Andrew.
Yeah, don't slip in the shower,
Don't
Jonathan
put that
Taylor.
out in the universe. Yeah.
Don't put that out there.
I think Theo said it perfectly, where it's roster dependent. If you're 8-2, 9-1, you're feeling good, you have JT, like, handcuff your running backs, be safe if you're going to make the playoffs already. But if you are fighting for your playoff lives, like, Zach Moss is not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. So you got to cut him and get someone that can produce for you ASAP.
Yeah, one of those baseball injuries where a guy just sneezes funny and then is on DL or IL now for 15 days. We'll get out of there on that fun note. Thank you for joining us, Theo. For Theo and Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see everybody again next time.